Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The union budget is just 5 days away. This is the last full budget before the general election in 2024. The finance minister is likely to provide income tax relief to the middle class. Those earning between 8 and 10 lakhs could see a reduction of tax rate to 10% from current 20%. Also, the 30% tax rate for those earning more than 10 lakhs could be reduced to 25%. Other relief measures could include increasing the exemption limit under 80C from 1.5 to 2 lakhs, increasing exemption on housing loans and increasing tax benefits under 80D. But that's not all. Job creation could be the other big theme in the budget, with a scheme to increase urban employment and a scheme to support gig workers with loans. Let me take this across to Gopal Agarwal, spokesperson of the BJP for Economic Affairs, and Dinesh Kanabar, CEO of Dhruva Advisors. Gopal Agarwal, if I may begin with you, do you get a sense, and is this the recommendation that has gone from the party to the government, that this budget must squarely focus on the middle class?
Actually, there is not an official recommendation from the party as such, but we had informal discussions, etc. But I think the general sentiment of the people of post-pandemic has been that in the party also the same feeling is that the measures taken by the government to deal with the issues after the pandemic have brought the desired results, and they should be continued. One thing was that everybody was saying that post-pandemic there is a K-shaped recovery. That means that there are two sections in the society. One is the vulnerable bottom layer society, and other is the affluent business community, etc. Both have been tackled well in the post-pandemic measure, because the lower segment has been given all the benefits that were required to direct fund transfer, and the second is about so that the business grows in the upper section. There was a support to the industry through PLI, there was support to MSME sector, manufacturing sector. All these measures and infrastructure spent by the government, all these have helped to grow for the business to grow. So I think both measures will continue. That is one expectation. And the second, what you have mentioned, is general feeling that other than that, to middle class and people who are salaried class, they need some support. That is a general feeling that has been conveyed to the government by various quarters, and everybody's expectation is that we will see certain relief in the segments of the salaried class or the middle class. Though with the growth in the business and economy, they have the benefit, but ultimately the taxation is not uniform or equal in the case of salaried class. That is one feeling generally people have. So I think these measures have an echo from the public, and government is always listening to what the sentiment of the people is. This is the last budget before the general elections, and the concerns of the people will definitely be taken care of.
Right. So you're saying there is a general expectation that there will be tax relief for the middle class. Let me go across to Dinesh Kanabar. Dinesh Kanabar, some of the measures, the top measure being considered directly aiming at the middle class is introducing a new slab for the 8 to 10 lakh category and reducing the tax rate there from 20% to 10 to 15%. How would this augur well? To what extent will this add more disposable income in the hands of the middle class?
So any reduction in the rate of tax, Parikshit, is always something which leaves higher income in the hands of the people. And when you have that higher disposable income, it obviously benefits the economy back, because a lot of the money, particularly in the lower income category and the middle class people, really goes back into spending, and therefore really gets back to kickstarting the economy. What I would think also is very, very necessary, Parikshit, and you haven't spoken about that at all, is that whether the threshold limit of 2.5 lakh needs to be relooked at. We have seen India with a relatively moderate inflation, but there has been inflation. We all know that. And with the inflation, the disposable income goes sort of haywire, and we need to see that there is more money left in the hands of the people. And therefore, I would first believe that there is a need to enhance the tax-free limit. And second, as you rightly said, if there is now one good thing about the tax regime today is that we have very few rates of tax. So we're looking at 5, 20, 30. There are not multiple rates of tax. Now we'll have one more rate of tax. That's not the end of the world. That doesn't make the system too complicated, but it would leave certainly more income. And then, so you're speaking about middle class, and that's what you're focused on this show. But I would say equally, you need to focus on, as I said, threshold limit, and finally on the higher income also, where while we have a highest tax rate Parikshit of 30%, but we have surcharge, and that surcharge effectively takes the rate of tax to 42%. Now that's sort of making things slightly unconscionable, and the government needs to relook. So overall, I would agree with you that there is a need to relook at the entire tax structure for individuals. The corporate income tax has been overhauled very well, and there is a need to really overhaul the tax rate applicable to individuals.
Right. And this is not just the only measure. Introduction of a 10 lakh slab, Dinesh Kanabar, is not the only measure that is being looked at positively, but raising the exemption limit under 80C, raising the number of benefits under 80D, exemption limits under housing loans, and also reducing the 30% tax rate for those above 10 lakhs to 25% is being considered. What will be the implication, the fiscal implication of all these tax changes, according to you?
Actually, this is one of those rare years where the direct tax collections are ahead of the budgeted numbers by almost 22%. We'll of course have to see what the final numbers stack up. But as of December, they were higher than the budgeted numbers by over 20%, which is a very, very welcome thing. Now, if we are going to go back and say that some of these, so for example, a reduction of the maximum marginal rate of tax from 30 to 25%, or for example, for that matter, increasing the 80C and 80D deductions would be very, very welcome. You mentioned also about interest on housing loans. Remember that the limitation on interest on housing loan is applicable only to when you acquire more than one house. And thus far in my interaction with the government, whether as a part of FICCI or otherwise, the government doesn't seem to be too inclined to increase that limit. But if that happens, that again would be very, very welcome. The housing sector is doing relatively well already. The rates have overall come down over a period of time. But if they still enhance the rate, it will be well. But the increase in the rate of 80C and 80D and enhancing the scope would be very, very welcome.
Right. Mr. Agarwal, coming to you. In an election year, the question is always how you balance populism versus fiscal prudence, fiscal discipline. What would be your view on how the government needs to address this thin line?
I think we have to consider 2-3 points. One is important that though the direct taxes attract a lot of attention from everyone, but they are not the major concern for the government. The thing is, the government has been trying to rationalize the direct tax, and it has done a lot on whether it's corporate or individual. But the one thing that I do not consider important is that increasing the threshold limit, because Prime Minister has been saying several times that many people should not go out of the tax net. That is very important. Though reduction on the rates can be there, that will attract more people to file returns and get into the tax net. But ultimately, if you increase the threshold limit, many people may go out of the filing of the return. That is one thing. And the second is the important point that I want to mention is for the government, the important is the growth and recovery and a fast pace in the overall economic development of the country. And that for that, many of the measures which we have been considering and have taken, like PLI, they have given a good response. They need more support. Even the social welfare schemes, such as free Pradhan Mantri, this free rations to everybody, that also requires a lot of funding from the government. And then MSME sectors, they need support. Infrastructure spending, they also need certain support. So I think from the government point of view, from our what we understand is that economic growth and development are very important. For that, budget gives a lot of stimulus through capex spending and infrastructure spending, schemes which extending the PLI to other sectors, because PLI has given a good result in the 14 sectors, it can be extended to much more sectors. Certain measures are required for the MSME sectors, where they require certain streamlining of the simplification in tax compliances, etc. I think they will be more important in this budget, and government had understood that economic development is not only tax slabs alone, but it is also important that how the size of the cake grows. That is very important, and through the distribution model, the government can correct the problems generated into certain segment. But even at the higher level, also direct taxes, there are concerns that it is too high on the individual side. So these are the challenges, points where there are concerns, where government definitely will be looking into. But the development and economic growth and stimulating the economic growth and continuing the fiscal stimulus is much more important part of this budget
Right.
exercise, and I think that will be very much taken care of by the government, because it is not only the domestic investors which are looking towards India, but at a global level also, there's a lot of the interest in the Indian economy for investment and other things.
All right. So you're saying that continuing economic growth should be a priority. But Dinesh Kanabar, my final question to you, I had asked you about the impact, the fiscal implications of these tax changes. According to some estimates by my colleague Timsi Jaipuria, the rough estimate suggests a revenue implication on income tax side of about 1 lakh crore to 1.25 lakh crores. What would be the impact according to you? How would this impact fiscal deficit? How important would it be for the government in this election year to manage and to check fiscal deficit?
So two parts to it. You earlier mentioned on about having that thin line of discipline, fiscal discipline versus being populist. And I don't think that the government, if it enhance these exemption limits and sort of give more exemptions, ATC, ATD, or reduce the rate of tax, is really populist, because I think it's just making things consistent the way it is required to be done. As my colleague on the panel mentioned, that this is really government hearing the representations that have been made from time to time, and therefore would be very welcome. To your point on whether a 1 lakh to 1.25 lakh crore is going to make a material impact, I think the key real issue, as I see it, as I mentioned to you, we are 20% up on our budgeted revenues. With the projected growth that we see, we are only going to go up on the collections. I don't see that as a challenge. I think thanks to digitization and everything else that has happened, the revenue collections have become streamlined and will only go to increase. And I don't think that this decrease in collection is really going to have any significant impact. The last thing, and of course not a subject matter of this discussion, but which is very, very important, is that the one area where the government seems to have slipped up on its target is disinvestment. And that is a matter of concern. I hope that if that was there, we would have really a fiscal deficit this time, which would have been of a very different low order. We just need to see how we can give that a boost. I don't think we should worry about the reduction of direct tax collections as a result of these concessions.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Dinesh Kanabar, Gopal Agarwal of the BJP, for joining us, giving us your view on what the budget 2023 could have in store for the middle class. Let's move on now and get you another story on the plastic industry and their demand from the budget. Now, as the plastic processing industry limps back after being hit by the pandemic, rising raw material costs and falling demand, all hopes are pinned on the upcoming union budget. Shilpa Ranipeta reports from Dadra and Silvassa that measures to boost local manufacturing and making exports competitive are top on the industry's wish list this year.